Welcome back to World Religions, a video series to accompany a semester-long survey of world religions, specifically to accompany the textbook A Short Introduction to World Religions, edited by Christopher Partridge. Chapter 9, Australian Aboriginal Religions. Australian Aboriginals are a group of peoples who live in the continent of Australia. Humans have lived in Australia for around 40,000 years. When Europeans arrived, the land was sparsely inhabited by hunter-gatherer groups, and these groups have a great deal of linguistic, cultural, and religious diversity. You can see on the map the main areas where Aboriginal languages are still spoken today in the modern nation of Australia, and each color refers not to a single language, but rather a whole language family. The main areas of common ancestry are also defined by that line in the north. You can see there were several waves of migration of people to Australia, thus leading to a couple of different regional ancestries you can still see in the Aboriginal populations today. Despite the differences in language and culture, there are commonalities in Aboriginal religions. They tend to put a lot of emphasis on the role of ancestors in shaping the land. The ancestors are godlike beings or spirits who were self-created and who also created. They had special powers. They used to be beneath the land, but at some point in the mythic past, they rose up, journeyed across, under, or over the land, and then left various impressions along the way. They also instituted laws and customs for humans to follow. After this period, they returned to their homeland and they completed their travels. The trail marker shown in the slide shows an ancestor Wagal, whom the Noongar people believe created the Swan River, for example. The textbook gives several different examples of features of the land created by ancestors, such as a water hole where an ancestor stopped to urinate, or a shallow depression where an ancestor sat down, or a flat rock where an ancestor slept, or a deposit of ochre pigment where an ancestor bled, or flowing water and springs where an ancestor dug into the ground, or a whole valley where the ancestors cut down trees. So this is showing a connection between the ancestors and the landscape, both living and non-living things, conscious and non-conscious things, all connected by this shared mythic history. Aboriginal stories, songs, and art often include tales of the ancestors and their effect on the land. There's a concept called a song line, which is a set of songs that follow a trail or track or tract of land pertaining to the journey of a particular ancestor. And each area of land is also associated with particular species of animals, birds, and other phenomena, and that can be connected to its associated song line. So taken as a whole, you find these networks of tracks or trails of the ancestors that cover the whole continent and intersect each other. In the picture is a painting of Barnum Beer, the morning star ancestor or spirit of the Yolngu people. Many people have heard of the dreaming or dreamtime. This was a concept taken from the Arrernte Aborigines, who were studied by Frank Gillen and Baldwin Spencer in the 19th century. Determined their language is Alturanga or Alturanga. So Gillen and Spencer translated this as dream times and interpreted it as a past period of vague and dreamy nature, but still connected to the present. And later on, it was known as the dreaming or the dream time. Now, that was just a term from one language, one group of Aboriginals, but other Aboriginal language groups do have similar concepts. And some Aborigines use the name law to refer to the same type of concept. That term highlights the fact that the ancestors created not only the landscape, but the customs and laws of the human groups who lived there. If you look at the connection between the mythical past and the present, this was termed everywhen by the scholar W.E.H. Stanner. That's how he described the dreaming. In other words, it's a non-linear, ever-present aspect. The ancestors, their stories happened in the past, but they still affect and influence what happens today. T.G.H. Strelo called it the, quote, eternal, uncreated, sprung out of itself, unquote, aspect of the dreaming. So Aboriginals have different understandings of the dreaming, partly based on their place in society. And understanding of the dreaming is transmitted to others through ceremonies, songs, dances, and dreams. There's levels of meaning in the stories and in the art. There's going to be a public meaning shared by most people, a sacred meaning, which is understanding a painting or a song or a ceremony on a deeper level. And there's also secret meanings known only to those adult men or women who've been fully initiated into the men's business or the women's business, which is a way of talking about the lore and the secret teachings possessed by people depending on their sex. The picture shows the creator god Bayame of the Wonnarua people from New South Wales. Painting is very important to Aboriginal culture. You can see in the slide the picture of the contemporary Aboriginal artist Glenn Namunja, who paints with modern media but in a traditional style, often involving dots and abstract designs. The textbook has a good quotation from a different Aboriginal artist named Marika, quote, "I'm not painting just for my pleasure. There is the meaning, knowledge, and power. This is the earthly painting for the creation and for the land story. The land is not empty. The land is full of knowledge, full of story, full of goodness, full of energy," end quote. So that shows you that the art, a lot of it, of the Aboriginal peoples is meant to have a sacred significance, not just for entertainment, not just for aesthetic pleasure, but to have a religious, spiritual, symbolic meaning as well. The Aboriginal concepts of ownership can be contrasted with that of modern societies. On the one hand, it must be said, the Aboriginal peoples did have a notion that their group had a territory that they controlled, but because traditionally they were hunter-foragers, they would roam around in their territory. So it was not traditionally the case that an individual person would own an individual plot of land within their territory. Rather, the group as a whole owned that territory. But people did have individual ownership rights over knowledge. So certain people had a right to paint certain designs, to sing certain songs, or to tell certain stories. There's also a notion of keeping up country. So this is a notion of stewardship, which connects to ownership because there's often a belief that you have a stewardship duty to protect and take care of something you own, at least certain types of things that can be owned or that you could have authority over. So the notion of keeping up country is that a group of Aboriginals has a duty of stewardship towards that part of the dreaming associated with their area, their territory. They must continue the rituals, following the song lines, and maintain those relationships with the ancestors of the places. And finally, many Aboriginals have converted to Christianity, but they often mix Christian and indigenous beliefs and practices. And sometimes this is just doing Christian art using the style of indigenous art, as you can see in the example on the slide. So that would be dot paintings, abstract designs, and so on. Whereas other Aboriginals have indeed kept up the indigenous religions. It's a mix. Okay, so that's our quick survey of Australian Aboriginal religion. Next up is Chapter 10, a survey of South American indigenous religions. Until next time.